hope, as a social historian, my presentation is long hoping an anti-war civic movement spread through Iran and Israel, stop this crazy war. Throughout history, social movements have emerged as the most vital force in resisting concentrated power. When political authority close its ears to public demands, when laws are passed without consultation, when voices are silenced, when dignity is denied, it is not parliament, it is not court that respond first, but people. In streets, homes, factories, and digital spaces, ordinary citizens began to organize, to speak, to act, to disobey the rule. These movements are not just reaction to injustice, but acts of refusal. Refusal to obey unjust rules, to accept imposed contracts, or to live by someone else's definition of what is meant to be free. Civil disobedience is often seen a lone act, a protester refusing to move, a student speak up, a worker defying orders. But when that act speaks to something deeper, when it touches the nerve in society, it can grow into something far, far more than powerful, a movement for change. It begins with a moral clarity. Someone refused to follow a rule that offends their sense of justice. And when others see their own struggle in the defiance, they begin to join. That's how the voices becomes many. That's how the protest becomes a movement. We have seen it across the world. In 1955, Montgomery, when Rosa Parks, as African American civil rights activists, sat down and sparked a bus boycott that shook the United States. In Tehran, when the death of Mahsa Amini became a rallying cry for women's freedom. Movements grow when the people find each other on the street, online, in neighborhoods, and in network. They grow when the artists, teachers, workers, and students units, and they grow when the message is clear. We are not asking, we are not asking, we are acting. And if the movement endured, if people say, stay organized and believe, it can bring about the change. Maybe not overnight, surely. Maybe not easily, surely. But eventually it comes. From new laws to new government, to new ways of being together. In authoritarian and semi-authoritarian regimes where power is enforced through fear and control, social movements often become the only language left for society to answer. Their strength does not lie in institutional access, but in collective courage, in decision to resist together, even when the cost is very, very high. They arise when the government rule over its people rather than with them, when authority became force and the governance became impositions. But, a very big but resistance need necessarily not to be violent, in order to be powerful. Not all the revolution come to be guns, comes with guns and blood. Some are velvet revolution. Some are moral, civic, nonviolent, and yet not less revolutionary. They bring quietly with whisper, walkout, veil removed, and vote questions, but grow into popular movements that shake the foundation of political system. These are revolutions that aim not to burn down society, but to rebuild them from below, grounded in dignity, participation, and truth. This is the spirit guided many of Iran's most important temporary movements, from the Green Movement to the anti-compulsory hijab protest, to the uprising against poverty and injustice in recent years. These are not simply protests for reform. They are part of emerging nonviolent revolution, velvet revolution in the Iranian context. Velvet revolution in the Iranian context, rooted in civil resistance and public awakening. Here, the work of sociologist Charles Taylor helps us to see clearly. Taylor describes consciousness politics as the movement when ordinary people come together to make collective claim against elites and institutions. He showed how the movement rise not just for anger, but for organization. When the people share grievances, build network, and begin to act. In authoritarian setting where formal politics is restricted or corrupted, these movements become the only arena when the politics is still alive. In this sense, Iran's velvet revolution is already in motion, It is bringing made not with weapons, not only with truth, solidarity, and civic courage and disobedience. It resists not only the decision imposed from above, but the logic that justifies them, the logic of domination, exclusion, and silence. And like all true revolution, it takes not for a seat at the table of power, but for a new table altogether. One built on justice, inclusion, and public will. If I had a glass of water, I would be delighted. In Iran, this story, the movement, had many chapters. The Green Movement of 2009 was not just an electoral protest, it was a collective awakening. Millions of Iranians took to the street not only to reject this stolen vote, but to reclaim the idea of public will. Their slogan, "Where is my vote?" was a quiet but powerful challenge to the system that claimed legitimacy through participation, but feared the consequence of a real outcome. Although the movement was suppressed, its impact endured in private conversation, in digital culture, and in deepening awareness. The public silence is not, it means public agreement. Years later, a different register, the anti-compulsory hijab movement, what began as an isolated act of defiance, women in public silently removing headscarves, soon became a widespread symbol of personal agency and national struggle. These women did not carry slogans, they carried presence. Their body became texts of resistance, speaking not just to law about clothing, but an entire struggle of imposed obedience. Thank you. And they spoke not only to women's rights, but to citizenship itself, the right to choose, to appear, to dissent. Then comes the uprising of 2017 and 2019 and 2022, driving with rising inequality, economic despair, and political suffocation. These are not led by the elites and ideologues. They came from the working class, the unemployed, the young, and the forgotten. They chant women, life, freedom, brought together gender, survival, and dignity, and one of the most radical democratic slogans of the time. One of the most defining in Iran's recent history of civic resistance came in September 2022, with the death of Mahsa Jina Amini, a 22 years old Kurdish woman who died in police custody after being arrested by the so-called morality police of allegedly violating hijab regulation. Her death, widely perceived as a state-sanctioned killing, sparked with what would become the largest and most sustained wave of nonviolent protest in Islamic Republic of Iran. What began as a grief and outrage quickly transformed into a nationwide movement, cutting across ethnic, gender, and class lines. The slogan, women, life, freedom, drawn from the Kurdish movement, Kurdish women liberation movement, captured the essence of what was at stake, not only women bodily autonomy, but a broader demand for dignity, justice, and right to live free from fear. The Mahsa movement was not limited to the issue of compulsory hijab. It revolved into civic rebellion against entire ideological structure of Islamic Republic. Protests questioned not just dress code, but a regime built on surveillance, coercion, and gender apartheid. University campus, bazaar, school classroom, football stadium, and city street became battleground of a peaceful defiance. Girls burned their headscarf. Workers went on strike. Students occupied university, and public figures from athletes to artists openly defined the narrative, state's narrative. This movement was leaderless, but not disorganized. It drew strength from decentralized coordination, online solidarity, and symbolic act of defiance. It demanded transformation. Many chanted for the fall of the regime. Intentionally, the movement resonant and in unprecedented way. Iranian diaspora community organized protests in hundreds of cities worldwide. For the first time since 1979, the Iranian struggle became part of the global civic vocabulary discussed not only in human rights circles, but in feminist, anti-racist, and decolonial movement across continents. The chant, women, life, freedom, was echoed in language from Spanish to Ukrainian to Korean to German. Yet, Mahsa movement also revealed the brutal limit of the regime tolerance. Hundreds were killed, thousands arrested, and many tortured or disappeared. School children were targeted, and execution resumed at a chilling pace. But as in all moments of civic rupture, repression did not restore silence, only confirmed the depth of the state fear and the legitimacy of people's demand. More than a year later, the Mahsa movement continued, less visible, perhaps, but not extinguished, in lives of underground network, exilic communities, and digital memory. It lives on in courage of families who speaks their children's name. It lives on in the knowledge shared now by millions that the regime's foundational contract has broken beyond repair. In the long arc of Iran's civic resistance, Mahsa Amini's death was not just a tragedy, it was a catalyst. It was marked by generation shift, not only in what Iranian demands from the government, but in what they believe they can build beyond that. Each protest, each moment of refusal added another note to the growing chorus. A velvet revolution is in slow motion, unfolding in cities, villages, and mind across the country. Yet, this is not the story uniquely Iranian, not only Iranian. In Czechoslovakia, 1989, in Tunisia, in Bangladesh of 2013, we see all these things. What unites the movement from Iran's Green Uprising, Mahsa movement, to Tunisian cry for dignity, from Prague's silence marches to Bangladesh revolt, is not merely discontent, but a shared discovery that citizens do not need permission to be political, that even in the absence of formal power, people can speak, organize, disrupt, and imagine otherwise. These movements are not reform movement. These are not just a political disagreement. These are nonviolent movement demand for fundamental change. A revolution not of blood, but of presence, not of slogans alone, but of sustained ethical defiance. It is velvet in method, but is a granite in conviction. Velvet in method, but granite in conviction. Iran today is witnessing such a transformation, not yet complete, but already irreversible. Every act of refusal, every shared moment of dissent, a wave of civic fabric no regime can fully command anymore. What began as a moment for movement very, very easily can be evolved to very, very radical change. As Charles Tilly taught us, consciousness is not chaos, is not in motion. Opportunities come, cycle turns, and voices once isolated became powerful when they coverage. And as the people of Iran, there are many, many other before them and surely coming soon. Continue to show the revolution not necessarily needs to be violent. in order to be real. It only needs to be shared. It's only to be sustained. It's only needed